The storm of the century is now. The world order is changing whether you like it or not. And so does the international security structure. It is changing at this very moment as you are watching UATV and me, Henry Keane, doing our best to explain these heavy changes in simple terms. Good afternoon. The main threat to the world and NATO is Putin's Russia. And this is obvious to the whole civilized world, and both Putin and his Russia know that perfectly just as well, by the way. And also all parties involved understand that only Ukraine knows in practice, in battlefield, bloody, deadly and grim practice, how to fight the enemy of the entire civilized world. Therefore, Ukraine's acquisition of membership in the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union is one of the key elements of a strong and viable system of international security architecture. Recently, Minister of Defense Alexei Reznikov had a meeting with a delegation of the European Union Committee on Policy and Security. The Ukrainian minister thanked foreign partners for the fact that since the first days of the Russian full-scale invasion, the European Union stands in solidarity with Ukraine and provides our country with comprehensive support and assistance in the political, economic, military and humanitarian spheres.
I am sincerely grateful to your countries for their systematic support and the work done. Thanks to the supply of the Western weapons, the armed forces of Ukraine are making progress on the battlefield. However, we are preparing for a counteroffensive operation, so Ukraine needs first of all heavy equipment and prepare reserves. We are interested in training the Ukrainian military at all levels, from individual soldiers training to collective exercises for brigade-level units. I have seen for myself that Ukrainian defenders have high morale. I can say with confidence that our guys are ready to keep on fighting for Ukraine. Alexei Reznikov, Minister of Defense of Ukraine.
The Minister of Defense emphasized that Ukraine is looking forward to the upcoming Vilnius NATO summit, which should prove that our country is not only a reliable partner of the alliance, but also a country that has well studied the Russian aggressor and knows how to fight it. Also, Ukrainian armed forces pay very close attention to the issue of the supply of weapons and their accounting. LogFast logistics program, introduced by the Ministry of Defense, which is used by all NATO members, allows monitoring the supply of weapons to Ukraine from partner countries and control the movement of material and technical assistance. Preserving the trust of partners is a top priority for Ukraine, of course.
On behalf of more than 40 representatives of European countries present at the meeting, I express great gratitude and respect to all the defenders of Ukraine who protect not only their country, but also all of Europe, our continent. We will stand with you until victory. Delphine Prong, Chair of the Political and Security Committee of the European Union.
One more thing. From the bottom of my heart, to those of you Russians who leave comments on our videos like, "You Ukrainians are out of your Ukrainian minds. Russia always won every war and will win this one, and you will lose, and all you do now is biting more than you can chew." Well, Russians, never even mentioning the fact that we in Ukraine never wanted to be the spearhead of the holy lance of the war at the price of tens of thousands of our lives and 16,200 children you have stolen from us. I'm glad to be able to remind you this. Putin was planning a 3-day blitzkrieg a year ago, when Ukraine was completely alone. No HIMARSs, no Leopard tanks, no ATACMS, no drones, no planes, no Zelensky in the US Senate, no Biden in Kiev, no money, almost no army, no knowledge what is going on, no worldwide support, nor any idea if the world will support us at all. All we had back then is one thing you in Russia never had and never will have: a thirst for freedom. Not a quest, not some kind of a desire fulfilled under certain conditions, no, not just some sort of a line in the Constitution saying, "We the people," and then letting any dictator amend the ending of the phrase the way he wants. No, we in Ukraine do not have, and will never have a choice. Freedom is a vital Ukrainian necessity, and without it, we do not agree to exist as a nation.
Держава зло, для якої стала нормою бити.
The evil state for which it has become the norm to hit resident buildings with uragan like this, to launch S-300 missiles at cities, to shell ordinary villages people, the evil state must be defeated in every sense of the word. Fascism must face a total defeat, military, economic, political, legal. And the first point is military, and it will face it.
You see, we in Ukraine are all about freedom. Unlike you, Russians. You guys are getting to your victory parades over World War II Germany, driving modern German cars. You are okay with the fact that you are watching on your American iPhones the performances of your out-of-control Tsar, if only he would remind you of how great you are as a nation, so you can escape the thinking about how Putin, the murderer Putin, and his thievish oligarchs are keeping your money in our banks in Europe and America. And their spoiled offsprings throw parties at your account, snorting Colombian cocaine on British yachts registered to the Virgin Islands, so to optimize the taxes, you are okay with Bucha. With the fact that your Russian fascist army, tuned by Goebbels' Putin propaganda, arrived in Ukraine to kill us because your master ordered so. And those having a master are nobody but slaves. Not so much because of Putin. Not even so much because of this war, but so much because of the fact even a free man can find himself in slavery, will dream of freedom. And a slave will always dream of becoming a master. And until you break out of this damn paradigm, you always, even having won any war, inevitably will lose the peace. But this time, Russians, you already lost it both. If we were not Ukrainians, but ordinary Philistine observers of the events in Ukraine, we would certainly see that the war against Ukraine has something in common with other Russia's instigated wars. In Syria, in Georgia, in Chechnya, after all, but since Russian aggression is taking place here and now, on our own land, you, the collective West, see only technicolored pictures of what we see in real life every day. It is somewhat comforting that world experts also do see parallels between Russian aggression in Chechnya and Ukraine. Associate Professor of History and Head of the Department of Russian and East European Studies at the College of the Holy Cross, Cynthia Hooper, is sure that significantly more Russians were critical of Putin's actions in the early 2000s than they were 15 years later. During all these years, the enormous Kremlin's PR campaign was aimed to show the rebuilding of cities from those who destroyed them with bombings. Over time, Chechnya's capital city of Grozny, destroyed by Russia, appears in the Russian media precisely as a city successfully rebuilt by Russia. You see, this is how Kremlin and Kremlinites do things. They destroy and say they rebuild. They kill and say they save. They steal and say they are victims. This is the paradigm of lies as national Russian idea. Residents of Mariupol thanked the man by whose initiative the city was completely destroyed by bombings and thousands of people were killed for their own new homes. Cynthia Hooper. The discussion focused on the reconstruction of Mariupol destroyed by the Russians and coverage of the recent visit of Russian President Putin to the city. Residents are grateful for the new homes to the man whose initiative actually caused the city to be completely destroyed by bombing, where thousands of people were killed. The panelists and scientists called the video from this visit staged, and staged in particular, giving an example of editing media stories when the shouts, "It's all for show," were removed from the footage. In the same way, Russia claims that it modernized Chechnya instead of saying how much harm and destruction it had caused to the Chechnya cities and people. Scientist Hooper emphasizes the methods of Russian propaganda regarding the substitution of concepts. The president of Chechnya, Ichkeria Jahar Dudayev, who was killed in 1996, declared a year before that, in 1995, Russism is more dangerous than fascism, Nazism, racism, all human-hating ideologies.
The government communication strategy of Russia, it issues information technology tools that can plant a certain opinion, distorting facts and memories. It's actually very effective and it's terrifying. In Moscow, advertising modern Grozny is depicted as the hyper-modern city, which it has become, as it were, thanks to Russia. But it is silent that it was Russia that destroyed it during the war. Cynthia Hooper, Associate Professor of History and Head of the Department of Russian and East European Studies at the College of the Holy Cross.
People who lost their homes because of the Russians are coming to thank Putin, says scientist. One woman calling her new apartments as received pieces of paradise. It is about how propaganda works on a neurological level for the brain, how it changes consciousness and historical memory, and false information eventually becomes truth in people's perception. Another professor, Stephen Barnes, expressed his support for experts and organizations that refuse to leave the past in the past and analyze the historical fact and its lessons. In particular, Professor condemned the prosecution of the Russian Human Rights Center Memorial, which was liquidated by the court, and a criminal case was opened against the head of Memorial, Oleg Orlov, for repeated discrediting of the Russian army because of his Facebook posts. The professor expressed his hope that the Russian population wants to change the harsh authoritarian policy and urged not to think that the majority of Russians always wants to authoritarianism and a strong hand. I hate to break it to you like this, dear professor, but I think you're dead wrong. This is exactly what them Russians want. Otherwise, when forcibly mobilized for an unjust, criminal, fascist war, Russians will be running towards the Kremlin to depose their mad Tsar instead of running out of the country to avoid bumping into the necessity to defend their own freedom. Our Ukrainian intelligence officials claim that Russia is about to announce a second mobilization, with speculation that as many as 500,000 conscripts could be called up. And the army of Russia will be 1.5 million soldiers then. I think it's time to be afraid. Or not. Could throwing this many soldiers into battle change the course of the war? Or is the Kremlin about to sacrifice masses of poorly trained troops into meat grinder in a move that hopefully can lead to Putin's end? Russia as a state doesn't care about any life in general and Russian life in particular, of course. Philip O'Brien seems to think Ukrainian soldiers are right not to hold grave fears of Russian mass mobilization. As the professor of strategic studies at the University of St. Andrews, Mr. O'Brien says the size of an army is not the decisive element in modern warfare.
Training and equipment matter more than mass armies because equipment is the force multiplier. If you have a lot of soldiers, but the Ukrainians, for instance, have the advantage with range and accuracy with things like HIMARS and their new artillery systems, those soldiers aren't going to help you nearly as much. Philip O'Brien, military historian.
Western nations have numerously made it clear they are committed to providing the kind of weaponry and machinery that we need in Ukraine to push Russian occupying forces back. Leopard 2 tanks are already in Ukraine, and more military and non-military aid is coming. The world has awakened and helps us fight the dictatorship, new Russian fascism. The US sends us M1 Abrams tanks. Also, American latest announced aid package is as much as almost $4 billion worth. It includes air defense, armored vehicles and surface-to-air missiles, while the UK and 8 other European nations committed to deliver an unprecedented set of donations, including air defense artillery and battle tanks. The Talent Pledge also makes it clear these European countries want to ensure Ukrainian battlefield victory in 2023. So, what does Russia have but its Tsar's murdering ambitions?
You really need time, and then you've got to make sure you give them good frontline equipment. From what we can tell, the new Russian units are showing up not with newly made advanced equipment, but mostly with Russian equipment that's from storage. This accentuates the trend lines of the war so far, where Ukraine has been getting better equipment and Russia has been getting worse equipment. Philip O'Brien, military historian.
Sir Andrew Wood, a former British ambassador to Moscow and associate fellow at Chatham House Russia and Eurasia program, says if Putin decides to pursue a second round of mobilization, it could send a dangerous message to the Russian people. Well, we very much hope so, sir. It would actually illustrate the fact that Russia is not winning the war. This way or the other, putting hard things in easy terms, dear, well, this 500,000 of Russian souls that Putin is about to send, or not, to Ukraine are dead souls in any way, whether on paper or in black plastic bags. Amen to that. It was Henry Keane on UATV State Channel, bringing hard things in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Stay safe and tune for more tomorrow.